The views and opinions in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Spectrum.
All right, I'd like to call the special board meeting to order. I would entertain a motion, or the first motion.
I move that the extension of the contract for the 2018-19 and 2019-20 school years for the superintendent of schools and learning as presented be approved.
Second, and call for discussion, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Something that has come up and come to, I think, all of our attention is just concern about the timeline and how this works out regarding the nexus between evaluation and contract, and I think I'd like to just spend a little time exploring that. We did meet to conduct an evaluation meeting about 2 weeks ago now, and that has not been completed, but we are in the process of completing that. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that process, how that works, and what we're looking forward to from this point on.
Did you want to?
Well, why don't you describe the process a little bit, Brenda, and then we can...
Okay. The process of...
The evaluation itself.
Okay. So yearly we evaluate the superintendent, and usually we do that in the month of January. And by state statute, we have to extend all administrator contracts by February 15th. And so last week, we approved all of our other administrative contracts. And what that is the administrators that we approved last week, and also Dr. Langenfeld's contract goes until the end of next school year. And so when we approved last week for the administrator contracts, we extended those contracts 1 year. So they went from being, 1 more year of their contract to 2 more years on their contract. So that's exactly what we're doing, what we're being asked to do today with Dr. Langenfeld. This is something we do every year, and to extend that contract by 1 extra year. We went into the evaluation process and had discussion during that evaluation process, and we developed a written evaluation, and then that written evaluation the draft of that, we make sure that all board members are comfortable with that. So I think the evaluation itself, and there's nothing that says we're required to have a written evaluation completed before we would vote on extending the contract. So at this point, we are still working on that draft, but we're having the vote today because there is a deadline to do that by state statute.
What is the deadline?
February 15th.
And I think it's fair to say that as we talk through that, then up to the point of the draft being created, there was conversation about whether or not there was comfort in moving ahead to this point, which there was, which was indicated at that time. The questions that I've received from a couple of different directions basically is how can we vote on this tonight without that evaluation having been completed? Well, for most part, it has been.
Right.
And the other thing that you touched on that I think warrants explanation, again, I know we did talk about it last month, is that notion of a 2-year rolling contract and why we do that, what the statutory requirements are around that. Maybe Melissa would like to speak to that.
Sure. Wisconsin statute
1824 governs administrator contracts, and that statute provides that an administrator contract cannot be any longer than 2 years. So it's extremely typical across the state of Wisconsin that administrators are given a 2-year contract, and each year then, as you explained, Ed, it rolls. So administrators in this school district, we have to be here for 3 years before we get that 2-year contract unless it's negotiated otherwise. And that's why on the administrator list, you saw some administrators that had stars next to their name because they are given a 1-year contract until they hit that 3 years. That's essentially to make sure that everything is working out and that we don't have that 2 years. And then once you hit the 3 years, then you are given that 2-year rolling contract.
And then just a couple more things. As in our discussion, we had talked about establishing goals and objectives, and we're still in those conversations, and we were talking about having, looking at that process a little bit differently than what we have in the past, and we realize that is a public process, which will be, when it's finalized, it will be out there for everyone to see.
Right.
Have you ever released the review prior to this year? Made it public?
No.
So because of that, it would be a nice, I think, in regards to transparency, to be able to do that for the public, to have the review probably simultaneously as the vote, if at all possible. I think it would be, it's naturally something they're going to want to look at the same time as a vote. And that's what I've been told. I've had a lot of people reaching out to me asking about, having it work together if possible.
Yeah, I have to say I agree, and this is strictly on technical grounds. I do intend to vote for renewal of Dr. Langenfeld's contract, but I think it's a legitimate point, albeit a technical one, that suppose there was public comment, and it's clear legally that the review is a public document, and would members of the public have different things to say to us regardless of there's already been an open record request for the review?
There's been 3 open records requests for Dr. Langenfeld's review. Our intent is to, in discussing it with Dr. Langenfeld, to make it public once it's finalized. But until it's finalized, we
Correct.
can't make it public.
Correct, and so I think it's natural if the public would like to, given that the public is going to see it because the open records request happened, I think it's fair and reasonable that we maybe wait a week and then make sure everything's finalized, have the review released, and then complete our vote on the contract extension.
It's likely we can actually get this done within a week, I would imagine.
I would think so. I would think we would have to because of the deadline. I mean, the intent would certainly be the intent would certainly not be to just time this thing out past February 15th and it auto renews. That was once a practice that often happened, is the superintendent's, historically, the superintendent's review was in a different part of the year and the contract just auto renewed. I've never had reason to vote no on a superintendent's contract, but I did think it was strange that the formal review was not, at one time in history, was not close to the time of the formal contract review. So I would support seeing if there's a way, perhaps we could somehow manage a special board meeting sometime in the very near future to do this. We could complete the review first, possibly on the 12th.
I had considered, very strongly considered, making such a motion to delay. Reconsidered that for a number of factors. I looked at what I consider to be the basic reasons for the questions, and I think it was more around information finding. What is the process? What are the timelines? What are the expectations of the board? And all of that, I am very, very confident and extremely confident that is all going to be made clear. It's being made clear. The other thing that I think does weigh into it is the fact as we look at when contracts are approved versus when reviews are held, and I think Dr. Wagner can speak to this as well. We just completed the administrative contracts, but those administrative reviews, and John, you can weigh in on this as well if you would, those aren't going to be done until May or June at the earliest. So to suggest that we're putting the cart before the horse, we really aren't. I mean, that is the practice. We have approved the contracts, and the evaluations have come in some cases, months afterwards. Isn't that right, John?
That is correct. We complete administrative evaluations usually in May. So generally, the contracts are approved quite a few months prior, much longer period of time than would be the case in this instance.
So, well, I do think the questions are legitimate, the concerns are legitimate and have to be addressed, but in fairness, we would be, changing the rules as we go along at this point, and I think we can look at the evaluation process, and if we decide as a board that we want to do more of a timeline that says that before we approve the superintendent's extension, that we have the evaluation done, and I have seen models like that. That's something we can do, but not something we have done yet.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and we certainly could, I would, if we decide we want to do that, then we would just push the evaluation time into probably end of November, early December.
Right.
And that would give us then plenty of time to finalize the draft and have it done by the time we have to vote on the contract renewal.
So how do we even make the right decision about renewing a contract if we don't have the most current review to look at? If the review would be essentially the most recent review may be 9 or 10 months prior to when we would vote on the contract.
Regarding our building administrators and other administrative positions, that would be based on very frequent ongoing coaching and evaluative conversations that the supervisor would have, similar to the conversations that you have with the superintendent in closed session and other areas, so that you are evaluating performance the same as we do with our administrators. So we have a very good sense of where our administrators are when contracts come up, and it gives us an opportunity if somebody were struggling or in another situation, we would have noted that prior and sought other remedies by that point as far as contract issuance. But again, the contracts are issued far in advance of the completion of the evaluation, and that's the case in every district that I've been in almost every district in Wisconsin.
And you made a real good point there, John, that I'd just like to reinforce. The information going to an administrator that their contract may or may not be renewed, they don't just first learn about that on January 15th. They're aware of that well beforehand because of the concerns that are raised in the supervision process, and I would say weeks or months before those contracts come out, they are aware that there are some things that they have to address and change, given an opportunity to change, correct?
Certainly.
A point of clarification, if I may, for the public. Because someone has a year or 2-year contract, it doesn't mean if their performance goes south that they have to be kept for another year or 2 pending the end of that contract, right? So for anybody listening out there, just because someone has a 2-year contract, and again, if their performance goes south, that doesn't mean they have to be retained for the full 2 years.
Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, although this may not pass, I'm going to make a motion to delay the approval for a week to allow time to complete the review. I do again want to make that make it clear that I think this is the right thing to do on technical grounds to keep the timeline correct. It doesn't reflect my faith in the superintendent, and I will be voting yes on the contract extension, be it whether it be tonight or whether it be next week. So I will move to delay the vote on the extension of the superintendent's contract until February 12th.
Second.
Any discussion? Sandy? Oh, were you, go ahead.
I just think it would be really nice to be able to have a vote. We can explain it to the public. I think there's going to be questions either way with our votes, what we're doing and why we're doing it, and having the review handy would take care of that. So I'm hoping that we can do this.
So, if I may add, my understanding, we have to have another meeting by the 15th. We don't have a scheduled meeting prior to the 15th.
Correct.
No, we do not.
Correct.
Right now, so
Right.
hard enough getting,
Right. It's
All this
logistically potentially going to be difficult.
Again, I would ask the question, if those concerns, if those questions that do need to be addressed couldn't still be addressed adequately if we were to go ahead and vote on the original motion tonight as opposed to putting it off.
I guess I'm sensing from the public that there might be some people who would want to, may have questions that would be based on the review for me as an elected official about why did you do this without a review? The fact that it happens that way for other administrators, I could see that may also be a concern for people in the community, or it might be a concern only with your top executive official. I'm not sure. I haven't heard this question about other administrators before, but regardless, I think it's best practice for the review to be complete, which is along the lines of why I believe it was originally my proposal years ago, which was enacted, that we went to we did something with the evaluation schedule so that the contract extension was not so far away, at least from the evaluation meeting. Although, yes, the written was sometimes finalized later, and I guess in retrospect, I wish it had been set up so that the written evaluation was finalized prior.
I have a question. Who's actually seen the contract? I haven't.
I have.
Oh, I have. I've seen.
I can't
by
say I've
contract,
seen
you mean
the
the
current one, but
superintendent's
Well, the
it's,
contract that we're being asked to vote on.
Well,
Yeah.
I've certainly seen in the past, it's sort of boilerplate, quite frankly.
I mean, generally speaking, we would view that and go over that in detail upon the hire of a new superintendent, and then it would be, there might be discussions about compensation, but the content of it would not change
Yeah, there's been very little.
from year to year. And
There's been
I
very
believe,
little content change.
I believe when I returned to the board, I looked it over. It's certainly available. It's
Yeah.
It's available.
public.
Where is it available for the public?
Well, I think if I would say
We've
if
had
we,
a number of open records requests. We frequently, I would say we get it probably 2-3 times a year. We get open records requests for Dr. Lingenfeld's contract, and I believe.
So it has to be done through an open records request, it's not just available?
Well, it wouldn't be typical to have a contract on a website or hanging up available.
I mean,
down
I guess
at the front desk.
as a motion, as an agenda item, I'm just wondering if it was out there at all.
Sure, yeah. It's definitely available. We can provide a copy to you if you'd like to review.
if someone from the general public, say they called Sandy or called you and said, can I see it, would we direct them to go through the formal process, or would we just say, here you go?
We wouldn't require someone to make a quote-unquote open records request, but we would acknowledge it as an open records request and provide it under the open records law.
Okay.
But we wouldn't.
They wouldn't have to do an extra process, it would just be,
Absolutely
it's
not.
obviously a public record, and we just
Right.
give it out as we have done.
Absolutely. No charge.
And media has had access to it previous years. And we've made superintendent selections. I guess I would like to echo what Ed has said in terms of, I think we've covered the materials. They're in a draft form. There are things that we need to flesh out. And the bottom line is it's the board's responsibility to renew the contract. I'm all for public access to the evaluation process, to the evaluation results, to the contract. But the bottom line is our decision, whether or not the contract is renewed. It's not something that we ask the public to vote on. They will eventually, it'll be reflected in the polls perhaps, but this is our responsibility. The main responsibility of a school board is to select a superintendent and then to continue with that superintendent.
Rhonda does raise a good point, though, and I do think it's appropriate, and perhaps we all should have done that if we haven't done so already, to have taken time to review that, and I'm guilty of that. I haven't looked at one for some time. Depending, I mean, if this motion passes, I would suggest then that we all make it a priority to make sure we, number one, finalize that review and sign off on it before the end of the week so that we can vote on this Monday, again, if this motion passes. And number two, again, review that contract thoroughly so you know what you're voting on. I mean, it's a legitimate point. One should know what they're voting on and have read it.
If I may, did I hear Melissa, you say correctly, besides the open record request for the superintendent's evaluation, Dr. Langenfeld, I thought you said that Dr. Langenfeld was going to release her evaluation?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And when, do you know the timing of that? Obviously, you don't have, but the draft, I mean.
Right,
We
we
have to
can't
get it
release it till the
finished.
draft is done. So the draft has not been finalized yet. So we can't release it.
So, but
until
after that,
Yeah.
within a week, within a couple days, or? No, I'm sorry, in terms of releasing after you get the final evaluation, Dr. Langenfeld.
Once I've had an opportunity to discuss it with the board and make sure that we are clear on the goals and expectations that are set out for me that we've already discussed, but and look clearly at those metrics as to what, making sure that they're exactly aligned where the board needs me to continue the work. I am very much looking forward to releasing it to the public and to see the clarity and alignment with the district's mission around educating every child to be college, career, and community ready, and aligned with the district priorities. And I think that will be a very important step that we've not done in the past. So I'm looking forward to it and sharing it, and really sincerely appreciate the expectations from the board for clarity as well.
As a point of clarification, so there's not a misunderstanding, it was mentioned that our superintendent would be asked to have goals and objectives. That's nothing new. That's been asked of every superintendent every year since I've been on the board.
Sandy?
Maloney?
Wait, can you repeat the motion?
Read the motion.
Please.
To delay the extension of the vote for the superintendent's contract until February 12th.
Now Maloney.
Maloney? Warren?
No.
Dorf?
Yes.
Sitnikov?
Yes.
Becker?
Yes.
McCoy?
No.
Wagner?
No.
So it's 4-3. Motion did not pass. So we have the original motion that's on the table. Is there any more discussion? All right, Sandy?
Maloney?
Yes.
McCoy?
Yes.
Sitnikov?
No.
Becker?
Yes.
Wagner?
Yes.
Dorf?
Yes.
Warren?
Yes. Carried 6-1.
I move that the employment of staff as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
McCoy?
Yes.
Wagner?
Yes.
Becker?
Yes.
Maloney?
Yes.
Sitnikov?
Yes.
Warren?
Yes.
Dorf?
Yes.
Carried 7-0.
I move that the resignations of staff as presented be approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
Sitnikov?
Yes.
Maloney?
Yes.
Dorf?
Yes.
Wagner?
Yes.
Warren?
Yes.
McCoy?
Yes. Carried 7-0.
I move that the retirements of staff as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Warren?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Sitnikov?
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
Wagner?
Yes.
Dorf?
Aye.
Carried 7-0.
And I move that the transfers of staff as presented be approved.
Second.
Sandy?
Wagner?
Yes.
Maloney?
Yes.
Warren?
Yes.
Dorf?
Yes.
Sitnikov?
Yes.
McCoy? Yes. Becker?
Yes.
Carried 7-0. Would entertain a motion for adjournment of the special board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Then we will move to our regular work session. First is, actually, I don't have anybody that wants to speak at public forum. Do you have any forums, Sandy? Okay. This is a time for our public forum, a time for members of the community to speak before the board. Is there anyone this evening who would like to speak before the board? We have someone coming up.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I wanted to come to the board meeting and show, we just had a press conference, partnership, what we have with.
Actually, can you
the Packers.
introduce yourself?
I'm sorry, I'm Tim Flood,
And your address?
3450 Yorkshire
All
Road,
right.
Green Bay.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
We had entered a partnership with Bellin and the Packers for hats. And as you can see, the Packers logo with all the high school logos on the side. And these are going towards our athletic departments.
Oh,
And I wanted to
nice.
kind of show these to the school board and kind of give a shout out to the Packers and Bellin Health with bringing this to us and having this idea and making it a very big community partnership for everything. So
And those are for sale?
they're
Where?
for sale at each school
Okay.
main office. They're $20 each. We've had the press conference last Wednesday, and sales are going pretty well. At Preble and Southwest, I've brought new boxes over to them in the last couple days, so they're going well. So if you want one, you can call the main office at the school that you'd like.
Okay,
Yep. So, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have 7 board members present at our meeting tonight. Also at the table to my left, Dr. Michelle Langenfeld, our superintendent. And to my right are our 2 intercity student council members, Grace Sinclair, who's our president from Preble High School, and Philip Balch, also from Preble High School. Welcome, Philip. Is this your first meeting? Yeah, I thought so. So anyway, it's nice to see you here. Sorry, and then I will turn the teaching and learning work session over to Ed Dorf.
Thank you. And we did have 2 discussion items on the agenda, but our first discussion item, I understand, will have to be postponed. There was an illness among the group, but we really look forward to that. We did have a presentation at our work group last month, and it was, as they like to say, some really good stuff in there, and so we will look forward to that in the future. So our second item then, community engagement structure for public comment.
All right, and that, I put that on our agenda because we did have a conversation about this last week, about how we can provide opportunity for our community members and our public to engage with the board on certain topics. There were a few details of that we didn't cover, and I wanted to, this is new territory that we're entering and a new process that we're putting in place. I just wanted to make sure that all board members are on the same page as to how this process will work. I think it needs, I'm interested in having this be something that's useful to both the community and also to us. And I want to make sure that the community has clear messaging as to how this will work. So there were a few questions that I was talking about with Sandy and Melissa, who are trying to decide what the agenda would look like in terms of posting opportunity for public engagement. I guess another question I had was if we're going to engage with people more, do we keep our 5-minute time limit, or do we bring it down to 3 minutes, just in the interest of time, and then also the person would know that we'd be able to ask questions and things on top of that 3-minute time. And then the question of how we decide which agenda items would be open for public engagement. One thought I had was, and again, I'm looking at this in terms of, I don't know how many people will show up, but we do have a board meeting also to run with, board business to do. But just in my head, I just throw out the idea that maybe we do open it up for public discussion on things that we will be taking a vote on, and not necessarily that night that we would take a vote, because this would occur at a work session too, but that's something that would be moved forward to the next board meeting. And then also, if we have multiple speakers on a topic, I know last week we said that the presenters would present the topic, that we would then open it up to speakers. And, are we going to have all speakers speak their 3 minutes and then open that up to board engagement after that point, versus, having engagement after every speaker? And then how do we determine if a person wants to speak and what they want to speak on? And then also again, I already said what the agenda should look like. One of the things I was talking to Melissa about this week, and I know there's and I don't know much about this, so I'm going to ask Melissa to give a couple of examples, is viewpoint discrimination, and I'm going to have her define it, but the reason I think it's important to talk about is that not that we would engage in intentional viewpoint discrimination, but that there might be things that we need to be careful of in terms of how we set this up, so that we aren't accused of viewpoint discrimination. So, Melissa, why don't we just start with that, just since I introduced it, and just give us a couple of examples of that, and then we'll just open it up to discussion to decide on the other questions, and then there may be other questions other people have too. So.
Thank you. So after the meeting last week, I had talked to Rhonda after the meeting and asked her, since the reference was the city, how does the city post? And Rhonda wasn't sure, so I said we would go and look at the city council agenda, and as our update said, there is nothing in the city council agenda on open forum. So then we did have an opportunity to talk to Anita, as well as Sandy did talk to Chris Teskey again today to confirm what Anita had spoken to Sandy about. But I also reached out to the Wisconsin School Attorneys Association to determine how other schools may be doing this, to make sure that we're complying with Wisconsin open meetings laws, as well as if there were any concerns that other school districts across the state had in structuring a public forum this way, because I'm not familiar with this in my work previously at WEAC or at Kaukauna, where I worked before coming to Green Bay. So I did get some feedback from some of the attorneys, and in addition to that, WASB has a number of really good legal comments on this. They're available on WASB's website that you could review as well regarding public comment. And consistently, what was raised and what I had already had in my mind was the concept of viewpoint discrimination. The most blatant form, and there are no cases with the really blatant form because those are the easy cases, but the most blatant form of viewpoint discrimination is, I'm not going to let you speak because I don't like what you're going to say. That's the most blatant form. The case law, though, is on the gray areas and on the areas where the public would perceive that you're trying to stifle their speech because you don't want to hear what they have to say. So, for example, artificially limited amount of time that you allow the public to address the board. One of the cases dealt with a municipality that that allowed public comment, but only allowed 10 minutes for public comment. And the individual who challenged the 10 minutes believed that the city council was stacking the order of the speakers so that those who spoke on issues or with respect to the position that they had favored and not the position the city had favored. Another concern that I had was how we were going to structure this. So if we allow to call people from the audience versus having to turn in a sheet, number one, that's not going to work for our closed captioning, because for closed captioning, people are going to have to come to the table, and we're also going to need names and that information for our closed captioning. But in addition to that, if we simply allow calling from the audience, I think that opens up the opportunity that if a member of the public hadn't advised a board member or believed a board member was aware that they wanted to speak and then they're not called on, my concern is that the allegation could be that they were not called on because of their position on an issue. So that's again why I asked Brenda, how are we going to structure this new format? Are we going to require the forms? Are we going to require that they be given to Sandy prior? How are we going to structure that so that we're not falling in those pitfalls? And again, with respect to that timeline, we had talked about how we would structure questions. So are we going to allow all the speakers to come forward with those 3 minutes and then ask questions? Because it could naturally happen that the first person that comes to address a board is given a number of questions, and then the speakers after that you may not engage with, or you may not have as many questions, or they may not be providing feedback, and then you're allowing much more time if you're going to exempt your questions from that 3 minutes. So again, that could be another pitfall with that viewpoint discrimination. You're not asking questions of somebody whose position you may not agree with. So do you wait till the end to ask the questions?
Can I just say, at the city council meetings, they actually queue up. They'll open the floor and then they'll queue up behind the podium. So they're not calling people from the gallery to come. And that might take care of some of the concern about someone feeling they didn't have the opportunity to speak, that they just came up to the table.
And we did, Chris Teskey confirmed today that they are moving towards the paper registration for purposes of the closed captioning. Mm-hmm. They have to move to that as well.
So, do you have the parameters from the city?
Sandy, you wrote those up, yeah.
So what was the problem with the paper, filling out a paper?
There is no problem. Currently, the city does not do that, but they are
No,
moving.
like for us to do that.
No, I think it's advisable that we do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But we hadn't
Yeah.
discussed that last week, how that was going to work.
Yeah.
Are we, because at one point we did talk about calling on people from the audience versus filling out the registration form.
Right.
So we were not clear as to how you would like that structured.
I did a lot of research and I found that most school districts, 3 minutes is what they give people.
Yeah,
With
and
the
ours has
timeline.
been 3 until just, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, we changed it to 5 because people, would feel like they couldn't quite get it all in. But in my head, I'm thinking, well, if there's time for questions, that I think people can say what they need to say in 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm. The important aspect will be holding to that 3 minutes, because that again opens the door
Sure.
to viewpoint discrimination, allowing
Right.
someone to go beyond the 3 minutes and not others.
Yeah. And I think what works well with that is to have somebody with the time flipping numbers so that people know what that time is passing. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of that when you're speaking. All right, so I guess are we good with? I guess let's just tackle time limit. That's probably one of the easier things to tackle. What do people think about going back to 3 minutes or staying at 5? Or
I don't like 3 is, I guess if there's, and then I guess I don't know how we're gonna, certainly question time shouldn't, are we talking 3 minutes? 3 minutes for initial, 3, 5, whatever for initial presentation, and then after that completes, then just no clock during questions and interaction.
That's what I'd support. 3 minutes, you have 3 minutes at the podium, but then as questions arise, I don't think that should be limited by the 3 minutes, and that doesn't seem right to me, so. But I don't think 3 minutes is unreasonable as a limit.
I mean, I just think of some serious situations that were brought to us that 3 minutes weren't enough, and I think the impact of to the presenter, the impact of a public statement was important, and it couldn't have been finished in 3. So, for my part, I would support every motion to extend a speaker's time, whether I agreed with it or whether I agree with the speaker or not, barring a very odd situation like filibustering, reading the newspaper to something very extremely bizarre. I would always vote for an extension of time. So for me, that would not be viewpoint inconsistent. I also, if someone was repeating the same material ad infinitum, I might vote no on an extension, but those would be the only times. So I guess.
But then again, if you vote against it, that, it's an interpretation by somebody else as to whether.
Yeah, but it would have to be so blatantly obvious that I would have no problem explaining it, and it would have to be, unless it was very extreme, turning the page over and rereading it word for word it would have to be extreme for me to vote no on extending someone's time. I would prefer 5 if it's otherwise unanimous. For 3, I would hope that we could recognize those situations where more time was needed. I guess for me, I'm not worried about being accused of viewpoint discrimination because I'm not going to do it.
Can I get a clarification? Are we talking about the initial open forum or the open forum, the engagement that we're going to have as we address agenda items?
Well, I think the time limit can be for either.
Okay.
No, that is a good point, though, because if someone speaks in the open forum at the beginning and we can't interact, maybe we go 5 there, but 3 if we open the floor during an agenda item, because there is time to interact then.
Yeah.
Can you
Right.
actually
That's what I was
explain to people listening why we wouldn't interact?
Because if someone comes in an open forum and speaks on an item that is not on the board's agenda, it's not legal for us to have interaction because it's not posted, correct?
You can have interaction, you cannot conduct business on that item. So you can ask clarifying questions, which the board has done. You can acknowledge the speaker, thank the speaker for coming, but you cannot conduct business on
Right.
the
You can't act
item.
on anything that they're bringing up.
You can't vote on it, you can't.
We don't engage in debate.
Exactly.
We're not going to discuss it among ourselves and
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, and I'll ask Melissa this question. I could see a potential challenge if we have open forum before our meetings, that people can speak on anything, and someone decides they want to speak at our open forum on something that's on our agenda, they don't want to stick around for the engagement part of that. If we engage with them during the open forum, are we potentially giving viewpoint discrimination because then that we gave them more time, or
No.
okay.
No, you're fine, as long as it's posted and your agenda, as long as it just needs to be posted, you can take it out of order. You don't have to stick to the order in which your agenda is. It just needs to give the public sufficient notice as to what you will be discussing.
Yeah, but at last week at our meeting, we talked about making sure that, the order that we agreed on was that the presenters would present first, and then we'd have public comment, and then we would have engagement. So potentially, if we start engaging with somebody, then and this isn't necessarily viewpoint discrimination, it's just something that
Under open meetings law? Your concern would be under the.
My concern is that if we're engaging with the person at the open forum before we've had the presentation from the district personnel, then potentially we're going in a different direction because we haven't even heard the presentation yet. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that's a legal issue. I think that's more of a.
It seems just, I know it's not a legal
Yeah.
issue, but I just want to make, I'd like to have agreement as to how we do that, because maybe
We have that right now, don't we? I mean, people come in and talk during open forum about
But
something
we
that's
don't
on the agenda.
we don't engage with them right
Right.
now. We haven't. So if somebody comes, if they come and they speak to something that's not on the agenda, then it's the way we've done it.
Right.
Now we're saying, no, we can engage with them if it's on the agenda. But last week we said, no, it makes sense to have the presentation first, then hear from the community, and then engage. If they come to the open forum before the whole meeting starts, then, and we engage with them for 10 minutes before we've had a chance to hear the presentation, does that cause a problem?
Well, I think it would. I don't think we should be doing that. I don't think, maybe we need to have a further discussion about what engagement means. I don't think we should be conducting business during the open forum, even if they're talking about an item that's on the agenda. I think we might have a little bit more latitude in terms of the questioning and maybe some back and forth, but I think the point you're making is really well taken. If you want to, be involved with give and take more, then you've got to wait until that time.
Yeah.
So then let's call one the open forum, we'll begin with that, and have a certain protocol for that, and then the others will be called board engagement. And that they can, or something else besides open forum,
Yeah.
so that it's more agenda specific.
Well, and I could change, my introduction then to add a piece that says, that the board will not engage during the open forum, but if you want to, that we'll have, I don't know, I'm
Well, you can also
wordsmithing
let
on the
them know that
spot.
if you're raising concerns about something that's on our agenda, know that we will have opportunity to engage with you after
If you
our presentation when we
right.
get to that on our agenda.
Right.
So that there is that opportunity, and you're right, some people may not
Want to stay.
want to stick around, they might want to just weigh in,
Yeah.
and that's
Speak their
fine.
piece, and that's fine, yeah.
Right,
Okay.
but not engage.
Okay, so we'll, does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't want to preclude some kind of special circumstance where someone can, I certainly would encourage, I think it'll naturally evolve that way, but honestly, I don't think there was anything that, if something was on the agenda, I don't think there was really anything that, other than convention, that stopped us from asking a little bit deeper questions about agenda items in the open forum.
But what's
Yeah.
nice about that is that if we're going to discuss an agenda topic, you open the floor, there's discussion from the public, you close the floor, and then we have discussion on, and possibly vote on something or not. The context stays together, and it's a little bit more of a collaboration type of experience with the public. So if you're looking to really improve on the public participation in decision-making, if you believe that that's something that's important to you, then having that together makes sense. It doesn't lose the context of what we're talking about. They feel included in the process, and I think people will end up feeling better about it in general.
And I'm not talking about that, because that, I see how that will work. What I'm talking about is what we traditionally have had, which is our open forum, where people can come talk about anything. So I just want to make sure, and I think it's just an understanding amongst us that says, I think we can ask some clarifying questions of open forum speakers, and ask maybe a little more detailed question, but to not get into a conversation with them, to just ask the clarifying questions and make it clear that if they would like to engage more about that particular topic, they stay and do it at the time.
And I think
when
most
it's
people, if
engaged.
there's something that they're willing to come and speak and be on record at a table with possible media around them, they're going to wait.
Sure, yeah, and I think you're right, but I also think there's probably people that need to get home and just want to weigh in, so, but yeah, I would guess most people would stay. All right, so, let's see. So, this one's done. So, so how do we want to work, which agenda items are opened up for public engagement? You know, what do people think about that? I mean, it's hard to know because we don't know how many people will come and things like that, but, you know, the question is, do we open up every single thing? Do we open up the consent agenda, the legal, or the legislative liaison report, the, you know,
Student council report.
student council report? Yeah, I mean, there's
Action items.
I think action items.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be, and it's not, so it would be an action item, because in a work session agenda, it doesn't say
But
action items,
It
but
doesn't,
but we
the
know
gov-
what's
we-
coming for
We
vote.
move it, we know the things that we're going to
Yes.
move to an action
Right,
item.
Right.
for the
So
next
it's,
meeting,
it's
so.
things that will become an action item, or are currently action items on the board. That makes sense.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yep.
The consent agenda is an action
Oh,
item.
yeah.
Do you want consent agenda posted for public comment as well?
Do we actually have to post them for public comment discreetly, or can we just say any item open for a vote? I mean, it's because there is a motion to open the floor for public comment, so we could do that could we not do that on anything if it made sense? I mean, I could see it potentially making sense to do it on the legislative liaison report if there were people speaking to something relevant to it, although I would think that would be rare.
You can always make a motion, well, not always, but typically you can make a motion to suspend the rules.
Right.
Which is
What-
what the city does, right?
Right. What I would suggest, though, is, I think what you're asking for is greater transparency with the public. So it may be advisable on the agenda to note, for, you know, how we have it worded, and public comment, or so that the public is aware what items you're inviting the public to speak. And again, you can always suspend your rules if there's other items that you would like the public to speak about. But I think that addresses your transparency concern as well as the potential concern of viewpoint discrimination, where someone can allege that you didn't open something when it was you never were intending for that item to have public comment on.
I mean, I'm inclined not to open the consent. I mean, open the consent agenda for public comment. I don't know what other people think.
And if there's any need for a public comment on consent agenda, I think the item should be pulled from the consent agenda and moved into the regular agenda.
You can do that, and the public can always comment at the beginning of public comment period, your original session and prior to the agenda items.
Can you explain why you're not wanting to do that?
I don't know that there'll be people that would come to comment on that, and it just, there's a, but I'm open to whatever people think, but
I mean, if there's not, and then we just move forward, right?
yeah. I mean, most of the consent agenda is personnel. The majority of it is personnel. I guess I worry a little bit about people commenting on people, and you know, I think we're much better served to have, if people have concerns about specific people, that they should they can contact us in other ways besides at a public meeting. I'm not sure I want to, you know, I have no idea if that would happen, but I don't want to take the risk that people are, that people are singled out and criticized in public.
Well, aren't there, we could, I mean, there are things that a member of the public could speak on that would be out of order for an open session, or at least debate in open session would be out of order because it would be a topic for closed session?
That applies to, the closed session rules apply to you as board members, so or the employer, the school district, so that whether someone would come forward. Some school districts have rules in their public comments about not being able to speak to personnel matters, that those need to be addressed to human resources and not at an open session.
This whole initiative came about as a desire to get more public input, to open things up, to let folks know we want to hear from them. And we've talked about using it for action items, which I think is sound. And we've also heard that if there's other things that aren't specifically noticed, we can suspend the rules. I think that we're in pretty good ground then. I think everything's covered that way. Again, the idea was to let the public know that, they have a place at the table. We want to hear from them, and there's a vehicle to make that happen. Every single possible eventuality, I don't think we can attend to, but I mean, we've got that savings clause there called suspending the rules, which, we can always employ that.
So consent agenda or no? What are you?
I'd say no to consent
Okay,
agenda.
all right.
I mean, that's just,
And everybody
business
else
items.
have a different, okay. All right, so then,
Excuse me,
go
some
ahead.
technical question, maybe you said it, I didn't quite catch it. If you did, people would still fill out a paper form for the open forum, okay? Right? And could they not also fill out a form saying they'd like to speak on a certain agenda item? So you'd have that up there?
well, I think we'd probably change the form to include that.
We're going to need that for, especially for closed captioning.
Yeah.
We're going to
Okay,
need that.
so-
But we'd
And then
have
that
a-
we will know when you need to call them forward as well.
Yeah. So they would indicate they would indicate the topic they're speaking on and whether they want to speak during the initial open forum or at the time of the agenda item.
And a form would definitely let them know whether it's open forum they want to speak
Right, yeah,
at or
Yeah,
later
yeah.
on in the agenda.
right. Okay, so we, I think, have covered everything on my list.
I do want to comment, I like the idea that you had talked about how at the city hall they queue up in preparation, and I think back in the day, before I was a board member, I was a pain in the side of board members, there actually was a podium that we would, yeah,
have
there
it.
it is. That we would attend to. I kind of like the welcoming aspect of the table.
I do too.
At the chair, but I like the idea of queuing up because it would kind of streamline the
Sure,
process.
yeah, yeah.
And keep things moving, just
Yeah,
for what.
well, and
it's worth.
normally we call, and it doesn't really matter because we're hearing everybody before we engage with them. Normally I call people up in the order that the forms were received, but I suppose it doesn't matter, they can just line up.
They can just line
Yeah.
up because they have to state their name and address.
Right.
as well.
Okay, all right.
Any other
clarify
comments on
question?
communication? Oh.
Are we on is it 3 minutes or 5 minutes, just so that we have
yeah.
the form?
Oh.
I don't know if I heard a final.
We settled, we didn't?
No.
I'm fine
I
with
thought it
three with the
was-
option
Yeah, except then
yeah, that's true.
that option to extend is a problem.
Well, it's a problem if it's not used appropriately. I mean, it's not is it an actual legal problem or is it a looks problem?
It could be a First Amendment issue. If you're not, if you are extending certain speakers and not other speakers. And again, it's the perception of the speaker who's going to view your inability or refusal to extend. It's not going to be, of course, we all operate with pure interests, and we wouldn't do that for a reason as to stifle a speaker, but it's going to be the perception of the speaker.
I think most people could get their words in within 5 minutes. I'd be surprised if we had many 5.
Yeah.
Okay, 'cause you-
Since we
Yeah, I
started,
did, but now that we're hearing everything, I
That's-
think,
just wanted to
yeah.
clarify,
Yeah.
because you did say 3, but
I
not
did,
5.
but I think that's safe. I would bet most people would be done at 3.
yeah. And that's been our experience, I think, with even
5
5
across the
minutes
board
is
then?
that, yeah, I think 5 across, I'm comfortable with that, because then it avoids us having to
Having to
make these
decide, right.
decisions of whether to extend or not, and, yeah, people can get their thoughts across in 5 minutes.
And actually, I think the city has the option, if you have used up your time, you can get back in line.
Well, I think the
After
mayor,
everyone else has
will
spoken?
extend, you know.
Does he?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, that's
I thought
an
it
option
said-
too, that the chair of the meeting could extend the time.
Yeah, the mayor can allow for longer length.
And do you want no cards
Oh, and it
then?
says they will allow a speaker to speak a second time, but only after all speakers are heard for the first
There it
time.
is.
Yeah, that's where I read that.
Yeah.
So I'd almost be inclined to, if they want to recue, then.
All right, so we'll go with 5 minutes,
And then do you want no cards?
no cards.
The time?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes, because that helps me.
Okay.
I can listen to what they're saying and not have to worry about how much time has passed.
So what we've done in the past, Lori has sat at the table with the note cards.
Yeah, yeah. And whoever, it doesn't have to be Lori, but somebody.
And actually, if you could, when you, by virtue of, by way of the introduction, if you could, I don't know if you say it or not, but if you could indicate that if somebody has something in writing, they're welcome to leave us a copy. And, because sometimes we get into trouble that we don't always say it in the first thing, and then somebody says something that we do want a copy, because otherwise we could appear to be discriminating against who we ask for a copy and who we don't. So just make it
Yeah, and that we could just.
a blanket invitation to leave your printed material, and Sandy can get it distributed to the board.
And that we could just put into that this public forum announcement's going to be 5 minutes.
You better start early.
But yeah, we can include that in the public forum description.
We can add it on the form too, that people fill out.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. We could add, because we don't have anything on our forms right now, right? In terms of guidelines for speakers?
Yes, we do.
We do.
What is it?
Can we go get one?
No, that's okay, because we'll just, but I think we can specify, quite a bit of this in that form, so it's clear. I mean, I'm talking about the engagement, speaking at open forum or not open forum. Oh, yeah, there's a back to it, that's right. Thank you. Yeah, so we'll just need to change the introduction to include the the public comment after each, the agenda items, include that on this here also. All right,
Can I ask one more clarifying question? I'm sorry.
yes, go ahead. We gotta have, yeah.
So for the work session, do you want to allow public comment after each of the agenda items on the work session, or, for example, at the beginning of teaching and learning, and then at the beginning of business and organization? Or do you want it after or before each agenda item?
I think after each of the agenda items that board is taking action on.
That what the board is taking action? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That keeps it cleaner, and
Okay.
then we can have, like you said, the conversation right with the agenda item.
Those are all my questions.
All right,
Well, any other questions or comments on community engagement? Then that concludes teaching and learning.
all right, thanks, Ed. Next, we have our operational support work session that's facilitated by Chris Wagner. I think he's looking it up on
He is
the.
looking at that.
You have it, Chris? Operational support?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Organizational support?
I thought it was Andrew's.
Oh, yeah, no, your name is on the list, sorry.
Sure, let's go ahead. Under business and finance, we don't have anything listed. There's something you'd like to add? No? Thank you again for your presentation last week. And then human resources, we have a couple items. They're talking about summer employment.
Yes, we are recommending that we increase the rate of pay for our summer employees who do a lot of the facilities work in the summer from $8 an hour to $10 an hour. And this is a good timing because after February, we start to recruit the students. Last year, we hired 28 students, and we give preference to our former students, graduates of Green Bay schools, then our employees, children as well. And we are competing with the parks and the city and the county, and they're just over $10 an hour. So we think that $10 an hour will keep us competitive. And then every year that the student returns to us, they get an additional 25 cents an hour. So
And go ahead.
If you have any questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, if the board is finds this acceptable, we move it to an action item at the regular board meeting.
You mentioned college students. Do we also still hire high school students, current high school students, or do they have to have graduated from high school?
I think that they have to have graduated from high school.
Okay.
I don't know that we hire
Yeah,
them.
okay.
I'll have to double check on that, but
I think
I
that-
Yeah, I'm
have
just
the
trying to
numbers.
think if I,
That's how
yeah.
we've done it, I think.
Okay, yeah. I just want to be clear so in case people ask me.
Yes.
Have we had trouble filling the positions? You mentioned competing with park.
We have, and especially the students that want to return. They, after that second year when they want to come back, we want to get them back because they require a lot less training. They already know ropes, and they're looking for obviously more money because they're working their way through school. So, yes.
I'm glad we're able to continue to do this. I think it's a win-win. We get our kids back here and
It is.
get some good work done on them.
Yeah, a lot of work done.
Anything else for that? Am I reading the next one?
Oh, that's me.
Here.
Yeah, I do that.
No, you don't, you do.
Oh, you do
I
it.
mean, it's listed here. I've not
Yeah.
just seen it that
Oh,
way.
That's right.
Prior to doing that, just a general question, Mrs. Marsh. How are we doing with finding subs and illness of staff in the district?
We're hiring subs every week. We're interviewing every week for new sub teachers, and we do experience a shortage of subs, especially when people call in the morning. Oftentimes our sub needs are filled the night before because the subs can find them, but the morning of is difficult.
Are we having quite a bit of staff illness?
Yes, we are experiencing the flu.
Okay. And more so.
Staff and students?
I don't know about the students, but I know that staff are ill. And it's legitimate. It is going around, and
Well, I saw, perhaps the rest of you saw it all, so one of our elementary schools had 11 staff members out. It's either today or last Friday, I can't remember. That's a whole lot of personnel to try to find to fill. And so, okay.
Sure, I just wanted to address as well that we've put together a staff rotation here for certificated staff and others to report to different buildings when there's a need. So that's something else that we've done as well. So even if somebody was taking part in a training or doing something else, we have people report to site when the site can't fill for its own sub.
Thank you. The recommended motion is that the board convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851F, considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where paragraph B applies, which, if discussed in public, would be likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data or involved in such problems or investigation, to wit, personal matters pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851E, deliberations or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specific public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. More specifically to wit, contract regarding employee, exit interviews, and contract regarding employment consultant, and pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.851G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is likely to become involved, to wit, litigation matter. The meeting will begin in open session to consider the appropriate motion for a closed session so provided by law.
So moved.
Seconded.
Actually, Chris moved it.
Oh, Chris moved it second, sorry. We're doing this.
Sandy?
Becker?
Aye.
Aye.
Maloney?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Sittenfeld?
Aye.
Wagner?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye. Okay, we'll convene across the hall.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, to view the program again. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.